This is Writer Life, a podcast about writing, life, coffee and conversation with Rob and John Morgan.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Writer Life. Now, as you can see by the title of today's episode, it's called The Pain of Some Parents. And this is a subject that's very close to my heart, and it's something that I have woven through all of the stories of the Curio Chronicles, especially Abigail's Summer and the first three books really highlight it. And then from that moment on, with the fourth book, things start to change and the message changes as there is sort of an evolution of success between Abigail and her father. Because at the start of the books, Abigail and her father really do not get on. There is kind of like a hidden, silent war going on between them. And I've given this a lot of thought and a lot of study over many years. So this really is something that it is very close to my heart, and it is something I thought should be written. Because when you look at it, there are a lot of negative messages within society, as everybody abides by some sort of unwritten code. It is a standard that appears to apply to all of us, even though it's not written down anywhere or carved in any stone. These are the rules that were set in times before us, and no matter what trends come on or what trends go, it appears there's a core of what should be, and all of us have to abide by it. The rules are simple and straightforward, and it appears that somehow our parents are the enforcers, along with our family members and everybody older than us in society. We are told how to dress, how to act, how to speak, and how to behave. And even now in this modern world of today, what can be seen as old-fashioned ways have somehow filtered into all of us. And as we age, it appears they become stronger and more stringent in all of us. Magically, the wildness of our youth is erased, and our memory of those times conveniently fades as we raise our children, and suddenly we find ourselves becoming our parents. It's a bit of a shock to the system, and it gives us that reality check as we suddenly understand the moment with a gasp and say things such as, "Oh my God, did I just say that? I sound like my mother." In many ways, it is a result of how we were raised, a sort of conditioning from an early age, and to a degree it's a mould that we're all fashioned into, as our parents hold certain expectations for us now and in the future. It's something we can never get away from. To a degree, it's been this way always, and it's understandable. All parents want their children to be moral and decent, and they do their best to instill that in us from a very early age, which does mean at times they discipline us to curb our more rebellious outbursts. But what happens when they go too far? What do we do when our parents do not care enough? Or the opposite, they care too much and smother us? Or what happens when their strict code takes over and they cross the red lines that take them from parent to authoritarian? It is at this point a boundary is crossed that takes a child from trust of a parent into fear of a parent. And it's also at this point that a great deal of damage is done to what is an innocent child trying to understand life and also themselves. The result can be devastating and damaging, and it can have an impact on a child that can last for a lifetime, breeding long-term self-doubt, insecurity, overthinking, and meltdown for an adult in later years. Philip Larkin once wrote a poem called "This Be the Verse," which has always stayed in my mind. I remember hearing it in my younger days, and to a degree it really resonated with me. And the verse went a little bit like this: "They fuck you up, your mum and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had, and add some extra just for you. It really is worth looking it up. It's only short, but it does address a particular issue that defies the so-called rules of society, and it tips it on its head. And it is within that aspect of the so-called rules that we should all abide by that when I first began to write the very first book of the Curio Chronicles, which is Abigail's Summer, I decided to add a parent who had crossed the line and write his daughter as the victim of him, so that I could show the very real long-term damage that was done to children from an early age. Now, the Curio Chronicles is Abigail's story, and as the book begins, we see her stern and overbearing father and her very cold mother sat in the heart of a village that's controlled by the so-called unwritten rules of society that we all must live by. And I try to highlight the negatives of placing everybody in one box and dictating the terms of everyone's life. Abigail is ruled at home by her father Edwin, and the village is ruled by Marjorie. And so for Abby, living in Wootton Dursley for all of her life, when she finally reaches 18 and goes to university, she finds she is nothing at all like people her age. If anything, without realizing, she's been fashioned into a perfect copy of her mother, and it starts a process of internal dialogue that sends Abby off the rails as she discovers freedom for the very first time. Her time with her roommate Birch really does become her time of awakening, and it begins an internal change that will last forever, as she fights to break the shackles of a man who has broken her mother into submission, and she knows she never wants the same to happen to her. The Curio Chronicles is in essence her story of her fight to be free and bring about change as she fights her internal self and overcomes her insecurity, body negativity, self-doubt and anxiety. It is in truth a story I always wanted to write. There's always been a part of me that saw the injustice of some parents, and I wanted to document it for others to read, and in a sense give them hope that there, was a way to fight back that really became the book Abigail's Summer, and the books that then followed it throughout the entire series. It was a difficult balance to get right. I wanted to chronicle Abby's life, but not overdo it, as I highlighted some of the ways in which parents abuse the trust they're given freely by their children, and as a result end up doing deep and lasting damage that takes a massive amount of work to overcome. You see, there's another rule of society that not many actually address, because it is one that's enforced by just about all of society. And no matter what you may think, this rule is actually the most dangerous, damaging, and also the biggest myth out of all the rules out there. And simply put, that rule is, we must love our parents. Whilst writing the Curio series, there was a lot of things that I wrote that were eventually edited out of the books, because I found ways to add events later into the books through kind of memories or added to the conversations between Abby and Birch. Sometimes Abby hinted at things, and that helped me to keep the pace of the books flowing so much better without adding too much intensity to the story. Because ultimately I wanted the books to have a good pace, and I also added extra humour at times to keep the books lighter than the subject matter. Now the series is finished, and as a result I've got a lot of extracts from the Curio series that really do speak volumes, and it's been suggested to me, because they were edited out, and my wife actually thinks that at some point I should put them all back together again as a sort of look back of Lost Tales set of kind of stories. Now, I may do that. That is if the series sells enough and there's a demand for it. But for now, they are locked in my computer, saved, as I hate discarding files that maybe will never see the light of day. But I consider them a really big part of how the story came about and how it was built and developed. Now, it was never an easy balance, because Abby's relationship with her father was just one of several plot themes that I wove together to create the series. But the cruelty and the authoritarian manner of Edwin does have consequences. And so for this particular aspect of the podcast, which, is all about writers and writing and reading books, I thought I'd add a few of those edited out features here to illuminate this particular aspect of life for Abby in a lot more detail. Now, in Abigail's summer, Abby mentions how she did not go home for her first term, and she stays at university, and the reason being she'd gone to Manchester University defying her parents, so when they found out, they absolutely exploded and tried to force her back home. She had no choice at Christmas, and so after several months she heads home alone to face the consequences, and I wrote that within the introduction piece of Abigail's summer. Really, I wanted to include it, but it should have been the start of chapter 1, but I cut it all out. So here is the small part, which is important, that I removed. I went home at Christmas to a really oppressive atmosphere. My father raged at me and grounded me. Yeah, that was not going to work. Although I lived in Wootton, so there was really nowhere to go, although my local friend Debbie was banned from seeing me, so I really was alone. He screamed at me and cursed me and tried to hit me. I ducked, but he hit the wall, which enraged him even more, and as I stepped back, he launched another attack, which meant my Christmas gift this year was a black eye. A great present indeed. I screamed back at him how I hated him, as my mother stood by and did nothing. I ran to my room, wedged the door with a chair, and I stayed there for 4 days. Okay, so I rang Birch and talked to her, and she told me how to climb out of the window. I was starving as I would not open the door, even though my mother demanded it. I told her to piss off. I hated her too. All I got was a long speech about how foul-mouthed people up north were. I escaped out of my window down the drain pipe, and I texted Debs. She brought me some sandwiches down to the locks and encouraged me to talk to Hattie, who, to be honest, once again was my lifesaver. She came to my aid and I met her on the canal. I still had over a week to go, so with her help, I climbed back in through the window, moved the chair from the door, packed my bag, and I went to stay with Hattie, where I got a really good, solid meal. Hattie was a lifesaver, and my mother relented slightly and came to see me, where Hattie bollocked her something rotten. It was agreed from now on I would not come home, although Dad refused to talk to me. I saw him in the village, and he completely cut me dead, but I didn't care. I hated his guts. Hattie helped me, and a loose state of peace was established with my mother, who stepped back a little and softened some of her strict behaviour with me, and so I moved back home for the very last week. I still think it's a very, very important aspect of the story, but it was edited out because when you open the book of Abigail's summer, that first chapter really paints the best picture of her fear. Now later in the book, Abby spends a week at Birch's house before both of them head back to Wootton for the summer. And I wrote another aspect of her relationship with her father, which was removed from Abigail's summer. Part of Abby's story was how, as a young teenager, she saw her father kissing another woman. And then later in the story, she reveals her biggest secret to Birch, which is that Martin tried to force sex on her in the church, which is another reason why I edited the following out, because I thought at the time it gave far too much away. But in the context of Edwin's behaviour towards Abigail, I think it's a really, really important piece, which is why I'm going to add it here. She had no idea of the huge weight she'd lifted off my shoulders. I was so afraid of going home. Even though I'd talked a lot, she still did not know or understand the full truth of life in my house, or even the village. I mean, seriously, how do you express that level of repression to anybody? How do you really get across the full understanding of how something looks to others is so much more important than how things actually are? Even I struggle with it at times. I vaguely remember passing a bridge as we continued on walking along the side of the reservoir. I had no idea where we were going. I mean, it was a lovely place, and I was enjoying it as my thoughts drifted back into my internal debate. I could hear my father in my head as he recited what was such a familiar line and the dogma of my life. Abigail, it's important that people see and understand you are a moral and upstanding person. And that starts with being polite and showing respect. Sin is not moral, and we should endeavour to fight it always. What a hypocrite. Just like the rest of them, I'd seen him with that woman, and he certainly was enjoying chewing on her face at the time, and yet he lectured me constantly. I gave a shudder as my voice spoke inside my head. It's not true, Father. I would never do that in church. Honestly, I would never do it. Martin's lying. Father, you have to believe me. He tried to take my knickers off. Father, please, I'm not lying. He pulled it out, and I could not get off the table, and he rubbed it on my lower parts. Father, please, I'm not lying. Liar! I shuddered as I remembered hitting the floor and smashing my face into the table, and that awful picture of him, red in the face, leaning over me, screaming at me. It was there again. How dare you say such things in this house? Martin is a respected man and a pillar of this community and church. How dare you soil his name with your filthy thoughts? I gave a jerk and breathed quickly. 2 large green eyes hovered in front of me. Dads, sweetie, are you all right? I snapped back to reality and blinked. What? Yeah, sorry, my mind drifted. What were you saying? She frowned and stared at me. Oh crap, she was onto me. Her ninja brain had gone on overdrive, and she was staring at me like she was trying to read my thoughts. This is an important aspect of why Abby is how she is at the start of the books. I edited it out as I was able to sprinkle this through the whole of the story to much greater effect. But it really is an important moment because it really does highlight how, as young people, we feel we have to hide the parts of our lives that go against what is the socially accepted standard that we all live by, which, in this case, is we must love our parents. That single standard is the root of all of Abigail's problems, and why she feels the way she does. Hiding it and keeping it secret is the reason she is so insecure, and that breeds guilt. Now, the saddest thing about this scenario is that the guilt is not theirs, it's not hers, it is her parents. And yet our children are forced to carry it, and that is the guilt of their parents that dopes most of the damage internally to children, or in this case, the damage it's doing to Abby. It is sad that children feel so ashamed they cannot admit this or admit any of it, and they hide it, and hide their past. It really is a damaging behaviour. And even sadder is that once you grow close to someone, it gets even harder to hide it. In Abigail's Summer, Abby mentions how they go skinny dipping in the water at Saddleworth. It is part of a later bit of the previous piece that I edited out. Because after they go home, Abby heads into the hot showers and tries to warm up and wash herself. Birch decides to join her and heat up with her, which actually frightens Abby, as she's not used to such things, and it's nowhere near as open or as liberal as Birch is. You know, Abby has issues with her body, and being naked does not come easy to her, well, nowhere near as easy as it does to Birch, who's a naturist. She finds it all very confining and overheating, and so she gets out, unaware that Birch is already onto her, and is working out things at home are far worse than Abby has actually mentioned. Does this bother you, sweetie? I gave a shrug. It rattled me. I won't deny it. I'm not used to people just jumping into my shower with me. She stepped back. Dads, it's not sexual. I'm freezing my tits off, honestly. I didn't think you'd mind. I gave a sigh. I don't really. It just scared me a little. I'm sorry. She smiled at me. It's okay, sweetie. I can be too excitable at times. Look, Dads, we are close. I really do care about you, and you become like a really important person in my life. I see us as sisterly. You know, I grew up alone just like you did. I guess I got carried away a little. I really am sorry. It did not really bother me. I mean, hell, we hugged really tightly in the water of the reservoir naked. And I mean, you know, we were really close. So close, I could feel her vagina bristles on mine. I guess it just freaked me out a little. As I've never done anything like this before. One's just not that liberal. Nipples and vaginas should not be seen. Not ever. Hell, you know, if a top is too tight, people frown at you. And as for my father, well, I don't think I have ever met anyone as conservative as he is. He makes Marjorie look a little bit like a softie at times. With two of us in the shower in a confined space, I was starting to really overheat. I looked at Birch. I'm starting to cook. It's like a sauna in here. I pulled back the door and stepped out and reached for my towel. I turned to see her watching me. Dads, sweetie, can I ask you something personal? I looked at her as I wrapped the towel around me and shrugged. To be honest, I was not sure. I mean, I know Birch. She does not hold back. I suppose so. Do I have to answer? She reached the control and turned the shower off. Birch stepped out and lifted her towel. She rubbed herself down. I saw her glance at me a couple of times. She stood up and looked me right in the eye. Dads, your dad, you know, he's never done anything, you know, untoward, has he? I stepped back shocked. How the hell could she even ask that? It freaked me completely out. No, Jesus, Birch, what the hell? What the hell made you ask that? She gave a sigh. Today, you were kind of lost in thought, and honestly, the vibe I got was not a good one. Dads, you looked hurt and ashamed, and really scared. I guess I wondered if something bad had happened at home, and I suppose that is the most obvious question. She took a step forward, her eyes came so close, they were huge. Dads, I'm here, you know. I'll never let anyone hurt you whilst you're with me. And I promise, I'll fight to the death to help protect you. I nodded and I gave a weak smile. I know, Birch, and honestly, I love you for it. And I do feel safe with you in a way I never have. I took a huge breath and thought for a second. It was scary to admit, but she was coming home with me, and she needed to know. If you must know, he hits me. He hits me a lot. And last Christmas, I got a black eye off him as a punishment. That was his gift to me. And he took away all my presents because I ran off to uni up here. He scares me, Birch. His tempers are horrible. And I'm trying to stand up for myself. Honestly, I am. She put her arms around me and pulled me close and just held me tight. and in a strange, really weird way, because she made me feel safe and warm, I snuggled into her. Thanks, Beth. I know it's weird, but thanks for understanding. You know, not everybody does. It's alright, sweetie. I'm spending all summer with you. No one will hurt you if I'm there. I know his type. Having me around will change his behaviour. His type do nothing in public. It is truly sad that what goes on behind closed doors can destroy a life, and it's all done out of sight and in secret. And I really do feel it's the biggest shame of a society where how it looks on the outside is far more important than how it is on the inside. In the same piece I edited out, the story does continue, and to be honest, even though I ultimately removed it from the first book, I still feel that for me, as the author, it was one of the most important things I actually wrote at that time, because in a sense, the whole piece, which I might publish one day, was actually the framework on which most of Abigail's summer was built, and it continued like this. I came out of the bathroom and sat on my bed in the guest room. I was wrapped in my towel, and I felt snug and warm. Birch wandered in with a coffee and smiled at me. She sat at my side and handed me the cup. Will you be alright tomorrow? You know, going home can be scary if you've changed inside, let alone on the outside. I took a sip of my coffee. Birch, since that night when I did my hair, I have felt so happy inside. I love that people call me deadly, and I really love my hair. I've wanted to do this for such a long time. She smiled and took my hand in hers. You know, when you first came to our dorm and I opened the door, I really was a little shocked seeing you for the first time. And the moment you spoke, I could see how bright you were. And so, I did not at first understand why you'd want to dress like that. I never forget the look on your face when you first saw your hair. You looked so happy. Like, for the first time in your life, you recognized who you really were. And sweetie, I never want you to forget that moment. Or this here and now. And if over the next few days it gets rough, remember this, just this. Remember my words and hold on to them. It really made me think. I knew what was going to happen when I got back home. I knew how my mum and dad would react, and I'll not deny, I felt frightened. The next few days of my life were going to be really difficult. I was not sure that Birch really understood how bad it was going to get, but I knew I really had to stand up for what I wanted, and I had to become the person that I was going to be. I lifted a cup and I took a big sip. I'm tired, Birch. It'll be a really tough day tomorrow. Whatever you think will happen, times that by 10 and you will be close. I really need some sleep. I'm packed and everything is ready. I just want to get it all over with, and then I will focus on the summer. She squeezed my hand. Okay, sweetie, I'll see you in the morning. Get some sleep if you can. She leaned in and kissed my cheek. Birch came out of my room and glanced back to see me slip into bed and get ready for sleep. She gave a soft smile and walked down the hall to her room. Her mother was sat on the bed as she entered the room. How is she? Birch gave a sigh. Nervous, scared, and unsettled. But she's also tired. Bev was right. It has worn her out, so hopefully she will sleep tonight. Ronnie nodded and smiled at her. She really is a lovely girl, Jemmy. I really like her. I find her so intelligent and bright. She thinks the world of you, and I can see how much you care, just by how you're so worried about her. Birch sat on the bed at the side of her mum and leaned onto her shoulder. She's going to have a really tough day, but if I can get her through that, it's my hope things will stabilise for her. Hell, Mum, she needs it. Ronnie lifted her arm up her back and pulled her daughter close. Jemmy, remember, how it looks is very important to these people. So just stay at her side always, and the tension will lessen for her. And then do what you can to help her enjoy herself. Just make it really special for her, Jemmy. Make it Abigail's summer. Birch smiled. I will, Mum. I promise. If you've actually read Abigail's Summer, then for all of you, this is something you all know, as I threaded it through the whole book. And as I wrote this passage, it gave me what was to become the book's title at the start of the Curio Chronicles. And I feel that my feelings were so strong that what was, only meant really to be just one book, it morphed into a series as I followed Abby through her life. Because after all, these books are her life, as seen by her, and showing the slow process of change as she works to overcome the damage of the past that's been done by her parents. The series is graphic, in parts sexually, but also emotionally, none more so than the moment of explosion when Abby finally can take no more and it comes out of her in a breakdown, where Birch stands at Abby's arch and she tells the full story in what is a really emotional and heart-wrenching part of this book. To hear the truth from Abby's lips and actually hear Abigail talk of how a man tried to rape her and her father refused to believe it is absolutely shocking, because in her fear of her father, Abby has hidden it, even from her own mother, and it is destroying her and driving her fears, anxiety, and powerful insecurities. Trusting Birch is really hard for Abby. She has hidden the truth for so long, she finds it impossible to talk. As we see on a few occasions within the book, where Abby knows Birch is onto her, and she tries to dodge the situation, such is the power of her father's cruelty. By the time we arrived on Station Road, my heart was racing. I was walking as quick as I could without looking obvious, and to everyone on the planet I was pulling it off. Well, all except one person, and she just happened to be at my side and had detection skills not discovered by the CIA yet. Birch linked my arm, and her voice was soft as Deb's what belonged, chatting with my mum. We were past the station and almost at the gates to Merryweather's nursery. You may fool them, Debs, but not me. If you don't want to talk, I get it, and I can float with it. But if you ask me, you need to talk to someone, and soon. I will wait, but I'm here, and I'm with you, and you know you're safe with me. I really did not know what to say. We were halfway up the pathway into the nursery, and all I wanted to do was run away, but I knew that I just could not. Birch, I can't. Not today. I'm not ready. Okay, sweetie. There is something very disturbing about being so terrified about the fact that your trust in the world and everyone in it has been so violated. You're afraid to talk about something that is destroying you from the inside and is the reason you are insecure and riddled with anxiety. It is a ticking time bomb that will eventually tear you apart and destroy your life. And for what? The vanity of a bad parent? The simple truth is that no matter how much a child may try, the fear grows large inside them, and so large that eventually it will spill over and seep out in ways many really do not expect, which is highlighted again in Abigail's Summer. And when it does come out, it is shocking and painful and filled with trauma, as Birch finds out in the most shocking of ways. Sweetie, you cannot stay secret. You know that, don't you? Everyone is worried about you and out looking. They're gonna ask questions. You have to tell them. I felt the anger explode up inside me and pushed her back hard and shook my head. Only you can know. I cannot tell them. She sighed. Dads, they're going to ask. You really screamed at him. They will ask whether you told me or not. Can you not see? This should not be hidden. People should know what he is like. I shook my head. No! Sweetie, you don't understand. The anger came flowing at me, and before I could stop it, I pushed her away with all of my might. Birch staggered backwards, almost falling into the trees. But I do understand. I told him, and he did nothing. Do you understand now? She looked shocked. Her eyes went wide. Wait, what? Who? I was the only one who understood. That was the frigging point. They're not like her people. These people are different. She'd not been here long enough to know them properly. I tried to breathe in and calm down. I wanted Birch to really understand all of it. She was the only living soul I knew would. She was silent, too shocked to speak. I nodded. Finally, I think she was starting to see it as I did. I bent over to breathe, and I lifted my head to look at her as the air flowed in, calming me down again. Birch, I told my dad, but Hinckley was too clever for me. I ran here to hide for a while. He rang my dad up, and he told him he'd caught me playing with myself in church. When I got home, my dad went mental and hit me. I told him it was a lie, and that he had actually tried to rape me. He just would not believe me over Hinckley. Don't you see? He was the choir master in the church. I was just a stupid 16-year-old. They all stick together. The truth is meaningless with them. Birch stood there, soaked through to the skin with tears in her eyes, and shook her head slowly. I cannot accept that, Dads. I just cannot. It goes against everything I am. The truth is the truth, and it must be heard. We have to make sure people see him for what he is. I gave a sigh and fell back against the wall. She still did not understand. I was wasting my time. It is a story, sadly, I've encountered a few times in my life. Something absolutely unacceptable happens, and the parent refuses to accept it, and as a result punishes the child to maintain an image of the perfect and caring parent out in public. Everything is swept under the carpet and hidden from view, and how it looks is more important than how it is. This is a story I know very well, and I've seen people suffer right into their 50s because of things done at home to them when they were just a small child. It's not an easy thing to deal with, and as long as it is hidden, it is impossible to sort through. The parent gets the moral superiority of their fake societal image, and the child gets a life sentence fueled by guilt and anxiety because of one myth so ingrained in society no one dare to challenge it. Well, I have, and I've written about it. Having suffered a great deal, in the third book, Abigail, aged 26 years old, walks home in the dark with Birch, having had yet another huge row with her father. And she's come a long way in her fight against him. And through Birch, she's finally starting to understand herself, and she has the following conversation. It's funny when you look back and you suddenly, finally see the truth. For all these years I've refused to accept his coldness, his cruelty, his lack of emotion. I wondered, is this what we do? Is it some sort of pattern we all fall into to excuse their behaviour for no other reason than they are a parent? It feels like society puts so much pressure on us to love our parents, and yet they were shitty. They did not live up to the same standard. They could abuse us, but society says we must love them. Society's screwed up, and I'm not having any of it. We walked towards Waterside Lane, and I gave a sigh. How many people go into therapy because their parents screwed them up, Birch? Think of all the money spent every year by people who find it hard to handle life because their parents cannot handle it. I mean, look at Anthony. He should be with his family for Christmas, but his dad cannot accept him as he is. It's wrong, Birch. You know him. He's one of the nicest, kindest and most caring people I've ever met. She smiled and squeezed my hand as we walked. Anthony will be with family at Christmas, Dads. He'll be with us, and we love him, and we care about him. You are right, though. I've spoken to a lot of young people whose lives have been messed up for no other reason than their parents were cruel or cold. It's a sad fact of reality. It is not pleasant, but there are a lot of people out there suffering. Look at Curio Life, all those videos. I watch every one of them as they're posted. How many of those people would be happier if their parents would just accept them? We're all creatures of nature, and in some things we have no choice. It is natural. I gave a really big sigh. The world is so screwed up. You and Izzy have got your work cut out for you, that is for sure. She gave a chuckle. It was true. Overcoming the difficulties thrust upon us as children is not always easy, but it actually can be done. It takes a lot of internal strength and a will to actually do it. And that has to start by talking and actually revealing the truth. It does help if you have people around you who you can trust. And luckily enough for Abby, she had two very, very important people. One of them was the most important, who was Birch. But for Abby, there's a second person. Someone who was always suspected more was happening than was being actually told. And as a result, she did provide extra love and care for Abigail. I talk, of course, of Hattie, who has in many ways been like a second mother to Abby. And as we see in the closing pages of Abigail's wedding, I stepped out for a second and was surprised to find all of the chairs had gone, so I walked slowly down to my arch. The sun was lowering as I looked at it. It had seen some moments of my life. It really was my sanctuary arch, and Birch knew that, and she saved it and brought it to me. I've no idea how to repay that. I just don't. I suppose my arch will now see more of me and more of my life. It holds so many secrets of who I am, and is the only thing that knows as much as Birch, and I suppose that really says everything. I walked up to the Gothic window and turned around and was faced with Hattie with her camera. It clicked. Gotcha! I've waited all day for that, because that's the one I will paint. She looked at me and she smiled. You did it, kid. You broke her curse, and you followed your heart. I'm so proud of you. I looked down at the floor. Did I really? I swore I'd never marry, but I could not help myself. I want Birch more than anything else in my life. Hattie walked onto the stone and leaned on the wall at my side. She pulled out a cigarette and lit it. That's why you broke the curse, Abby. She wanted something far more than Edwin, but she stepped back at the last second and married him instead. You married your heart's desire. She didn't, because she was not strong enough. You did, and that is so important. Abby, you did what you wanted, and you did it your way. She backed out with cold feet. I looked up at her. You're pretty happy now, though, with Clive, yeah? You must have really finally got over her. Hattie blew out a smoke ring. Clive's a wonderful man, but he'll always be a second to her. Abby, I will never get over her. You almost made the same mistake, and I'm so fucking glad you did not. I understood that. Twice I'd almost lost her, and I never want to even come close to that again. I really want this marriage to work. I never want to lose her, Hattie. She smiled. Oh, you won't, Abby. There's absolutely no chance of that. How can you be so sure, Hattie? People change. She turned on the wall and looked at me. Her eyes were bright and full of life. Abby, I never had kids. I didn't need to. She had you. You're as much a daughter to me as you could get. I changed your bum as a baby, pushed your pram, saw your first steps, heard your first words. You're my daughter, and I love you so very much. Now ask yourself this. When you came within an inch of losing her, who was it who pulled you back together? I felt so close to her. I always have. And I felt this huge wave of emotion boil up inside me, and my eyes filled with yet more tears. You were always there. When they weren't, you were. I love you too, Hattie. You've always been my second mum. You know that. She smiled. I won't let you fail, kid. Not ever. I will never let my daughter fail. I gave a huge sob and she pulled me into her arms and hugged me closely and spoke softly. Abby, go. Go and live. Be you with Birch and be happy. She was right. She's always been there like a shadow watching over me. She stood by me with Martin, kept her word when I told her about Dad's affair, defended me in the village, and was there to help when I screwed up with Kyle. Without her, I would never have made it through. When my parents shunned me, she loved me even more. I could never thank her enough. She let me go and I stepped back and smiled. She handed me a tissue. You'll have to leave soon, Mrs. Dixon. I looked up and gasped a smile. Oh, Hattie, you're the first person to ever call me that. I wiped my eyes and she smiled at me. I know, it was deliberate. Go on, go and get ready. You have a whole new life of adventure waiting with that insanely beautiful woman. I nodded and smiled. I love you, Hattie. Thanks for everything. Without you, I would never have made it. I gave her another huge hug, and then she pushed me back with a big smile. Go. Live. Society is not always right because they frame everything into a set of ideals that are one size fits all. And some people will never fit into that box, especially abusive parents. This is not a new story. It's as old as time. And yet even now we still see the world of parenting with blinkered eyes, and we refuse to accept what we know is disgraceful behaviour as we try to justify it with a fake identity of all is well, when it clearly is not. As a writer, I feel strongly that these are the sorts of things that should be highlighted and pointed out. And within the pages of the Curio Chronicles, I've tried to do that with, not just this subject, but several others. I feel it's a conversation that's worth having, because if the truth be known, we really do not have to love those who hurt us, no matter what the rest of the world thinks. Not liking those who victimized you is a normal reaction to the damage they've done, and it's a natural response to pain that you feel. And no matter what the rest of the world must say, you actually have a right to feel the way you do, because it is justifiable. Thank you to everybody who sat and listened to me waffle on again about something that I'm actually really, really passionate about. This is something that I've been very involved with in my life, helping children overcome the damage done by their parents. It really is a sad state of affairs, but I hope once again that through the podcast I've been able to provide something that'll just make you sit back and think. And maybe you'll notice more things going on in the world around you. I've no idea. All I can say is, if you enjoy the kind of things that I talk about or the books that I write, please do me a big favour and like the video, and if you can, subscribe to the channel so that I can increase the size of the viral reach and get a lot more people listening in. I'll be back next week with something completely different again. And so, until then, I will say goodbye and thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Writer Life podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, or there are areas of Robin's stories you would like him to discuss, please add your thoughts and questions in the comments, and we will include them in a future episode. You can follow Robin on all his social media links, which you will find listed below, and please, like and subscribe to this channel, so you get the latest notifications when he posts. All Robin's books are available in digital and print formats to purchase or download through all online book sales sites.